An honest assessment, as you well know, dictates that we must be aware of the danger of a single story, which the bright young Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie explained with her characteristic straight talk, and I quote, "The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story," end of quote. For far too long we have been seeing stereotypical and one-sided stories being used to describe Africa. From the time of the European Renaissance in the 15th century, Africa has been portrayed as a place of mystery, a savage wasteland of hideous human culture. Forgotten were the contributions of Africans to the so-called Age of Enlightenment. Tall figures such as Russian poet Pushkin, French writer Alexander Dumas, Franciscan monk Saint Benedict of Palermo, who was born actually from Ethiopian parents, and many others contribute to the significant ways for the European Renaissance. Now it's about our Renaissance. And if we go into how we have been portrayed from the painter William Voss to the philosopher Hegel to the Polish writer Joseph Conrad, it is quite appalling. And it's interesting to refer to Conrad in light of the words of Vice President Ruto. Conrad was one of the worst, and his novel became a legend. It was called The Heart of Darkness. And he wrote of this, he wrote this description of the Negro society, as he called it. And just portray, as I'm reading, that you are in the tarmac of an airport where a foreign dignitary is being received by African leaders. And I quote, "There would be a glimpse of rush walls, of picked grass roofs, a will of black limbs, a mass of clapping hands, of feet stamping, of bodies swaying, of eyes rolling, under the drop foliage. The steamer toiled along slowly on the edge of a black and incomprehensible frenzy. The prehistoric man was cursing us, praying to us, welcoming us. Who could tell? We glided past like phantoms, wondering, secretly appalled, as sane man would be before an enthusiastic outbreak in a madhouse." This is 1975. And the late Chinua Achebe responded in his essay, An Image of Africa, that Conrad reduces and degrades Africans to limbs, angles, glistening white eyeballs leading to the sneer of the word ugly. Now, this is not unfortunately stopped as we just look at Conrad. In 1977, Disney released a very famous movie, The Rescuers, an animation video in which a group of mice helped animals in trouble all over the world. In one scene, there is an international congress of the Society of the Mice with delegates from all countries. The French mouse in his beret, the Turkish mouse in his fez, and of course a female mouse in a boo-boo representing Africa. No wonder there is now a sarcastic blog entitled "Africa is a Country," as a reaction to old and tired images of the continent. But it's not just European. The Trinidadian-born Indian origin writer Naipaul is famously quoted as saying, and I quote, "Africans need to be kicked. That's the only thing they understand." And in response to the question, what is the future of Africa? He said to have responded, "Africa has no future." For a literature Nobel Prize winner, this is quite a statement. This is not all. Now I'm going to May 2013, this year, when the National Geographic magazine entitled greatest American travel writer of all times, Paul Theroux, published his latest book, who happens to be about Africa. The book, it's called The Last Train to Zona Verde, and describes Africa, and I quote, "The awful, poisoned, populous Africa, the Africa of cheated, despised, and accommodated people, of seemingly unfixable blight." And as he slowly describes his way from Cape Town to Luanda, he wrote, "I became conscious of entering a zone of irrationality. Going deeper into Luanda meant traveling into madness." Another juicy bit is what he says about African rap music. "Naturally, you wonder what is in the heads of the young here, who have adopted these songs as their anthems. Are they merely idle?" Theroux writes as if it had taken seriously. Kenyan writer Wainaina's sarcastic instructions on how to write about Africa. As we speak today, the parody and misperceptions about Africa continue to this day. Despite almost 100% internet penetration, it is almost, in Europe and America, it is still not unusual for Africa to be perceived only as a place of famine, anger, and wars. Despite the wind of Afro-enthusiasm blowing, the majority of news about Africa is written and spread by people reading the likes of Paul Theroux. Admittedly, this is different from financial and business media and consulting firms, which look at Africa as a business opportunity. Their narrative is also, with its own nuances, and in many instances, without a clear focus on what Africa really is or needs. So I think it is high time for us to struggle against the single story, to struggle against stereotypes, and also for us to be able to put our own story, as Vice President Ruto rightly articulated. And I'm going to finish with another quotation. In fact, it's another story. In a confrontation between French anthropologist Jean Rouch and Senegalese filmmaker Osman Sembène in 1975, Sembène asks whether European cinematographers will continue to make films about Africa once there are more African cinematographers. When Jean Rouch answers in the affirmative, noting that anthropology was based on the idea that whoever looks at a foreign culture can see it better, Osman responds that it is not enough to just observe, but that there is also a need to analyze. For example, he says, it is not enough to say that men we see are walking. We must know where they come from and where they are going. The truth of Sembène's statement is now confirmed with the knowledge that Nollywood is the third highest grossing film industry in the world, with the revenues of $800 million in the past 3 years. As the narrative of the continent continues to change, we need to be at the forefront of writing, analyzing, and recording it, and not just quoting those who observe us from afar. And this, even if they look nice to us. Thank you.